What is going on, everybody? Tonka here, and I want to help answer some questions that I see all the time on various streaming subreddits and forums. And that is related to bitrate and resolution. What bitrate and resolution should you stream at? Now, some of the more common individual questions that we see on these various subreddits and forums are, what bitrate should I stream at? What resolution should I stream at? Should I pick a higher resolution even if my bitrate has to be limited? And then the age-old question of 60 frames per second versus 30 frames per second. Well, let's take a look at some of the examples that I've recorded for the purpose of showing the difference in bitrate and resolution to help you make a decision for your channel. Now, I've recorded footage for two games, Overwatch and Hearthstone. And the reason I've done that is Hearthstone does not really require a very high bitrate in order to stream and make it look good because there's not a lot of action. So Hearthstone will really show a good difference between resolutions. And on the bitrate side, I have Overwatch, which has a lot of motion, there's a lot of action, and it will actually show you a very good difference between bitrates and resolutions so that you can make a better decision. Let's take a look. So the character that I decided to pick is Genji. The first example that we have is 480p, 30 frames per second at 1K bitrate. At this bitrate, you can see that there is some artifacting on the screen, and at 480p, it doesn't look that crisp. Stepping it up to 1500 bitrate, you can tell that some of the pixelation has gone away, but it's still there. And then moving on to 2K bitrate, it's still there. But 2K bitrate definitely looks a lot better at 480p, but 480p at 1500 bitrate is definitely passable. Now when you move up to 720p at 1500 bitrate, you see that the resolution looks a lot better, so the picture looks better if I was still. But because I'm moving around a lot, there's a lot of artifacting. At 2000 bitrate, again, the artifacting and the pixelation, it starts to get better, but it's still there. And then stepping up to 2500 bitrate, which is kind of a sweet spot for streamers at 720p, the pixelation is not as bad. It's still there, but it's nowhere near as bad, and it's very acceptable. 2500 bitrate, though, at 1080p is not as acceptable. It still looks pretty good. And then moving up to 3500 bitrate, you can tell it looks a lot better. 3500 bitrate is a very common bitrate to pick because Hitbox and Beam don't allow over 3500 bitrate at this time. So if you're trying to stream at 1080p, 3500 bitrate is going to be the max on there, unless you're on Twitch or YouTube. And on both of them, 4500 bitrate is fine. And again, this is for streaming, not recording YouTube footage. Moving on into Hearthstone, 480p, 1K bitrate at 30 frames per second. You can see that the picture doesn't look very crisp, but there's not a lot of pixelation. And switching to 1500 bitrate, not that much of a difference. It actually looks fine and is very passable. At 2000 bitrate, again, not that much of a difference. Hearthstone really gets a very big benefit from upping your resolution. So at 1500 bitrate, 720p, you can tell it looks way better. Way better, because there's not a lot of motion. So if you have a very low bitrate and you stream Hearthstone, it's not that big of a problem. You can still stream at 720p at 1500 bitrate. No problem there. Moving up to 2000 and 2500 bitrate, it's really hard to tell the difference between these two. And you'll notice that when we move up to 1080p here, that at 2500 bitrate, it looks pretty much like the game looks. There's a little bit of pixelation, but it looks pretty crisp. 3500 bitrate, a little bit crisper. If you've got the potential upload, 3500 bitrate is going to make your stream look a little bit cleaner, but at 1080p, you can stream at 2500 and be perfectly fine. And then this is overkill, 4500. Oh, good lord. Oh my god. I forgot about this clip. That was incredibly unlucky. My god. Well, let's take a look at some comparisons at specific bit rates. So if you only have a certain upload, for example, in this clip here, 2000 bit rate. If you only can manage 2000 bit rate, should you pick 480p, 720p, or 1080p? Well, at 2000 bit rate, you can see at 480p, it looks okay. 720p, it looks okay, and then at 1080p, no go. Don't stream at 1080p 2000 bitrate. You can see, especially on a fast game like Overwatch. On Hearthstone it was fine, but Overwatch, no. At 3000 bitrate 480p, it doesn't look that much different than at 2000 bitrate 480p. Now 720p 3000 bitrate, it looks fine, and this is actually a really good setting to stream at. Now moving on to 1080p 3000 bitrate, there's a little bit more pixelation, but the picture looks a lot better. But it's really up to you to decide that stuff. Now 720p 60 frames per second at 3500 bitrate, and 1080p 30 frames per second at 3500 bitrate. Now this is if you are streaming to something like Beam or Hitbox. If you're streaming to Beam or Hitbox, 3500 bitrate is your max bitrate. And even if you're streaming to Twitch and you have a decent internet, but not a very high upload, I know a lot of Comcast subscribers have really great downloads, but not very high upload. I have a 10K upload. You may have only a 5K upload, so 3500 might be a good bit rate to pick for streaming. So now the question is, if you have 3500 bitrate, should you stream at 720p 60 frames per second or 1080p 30 frames per second? Let's take a look. Now obviously in Hearthstone, just stream at 1080p. I mean, you can even drop it to 2500 bitrate and not put any stress on your upload, but at games like CSGO and Overwatch and Pub Battlegrounds, H1Z1, some of these really popular games on Twitch and other various streaming platforms, 3500 bitrate may be all you can manage, and 720p 60 frames per second, it looks pretty good. There is some pixelation there, but I think the pixelation is actually worse on 1080p, but it's really hard to tell the difference. Now, can you tell the difference between 720p 60 FPS and 1080p 30 FPS? This on screen, what is this? This is actually 1080p 30 frames per second. Now I've got another one coming up. See if you can tell the difference. Is this 720p 60 FPS or 1080p 30 FPS? Now this one was the 720p 60 FPS. So again, you can kind of use this as an example of what bitrate you want to stream at. These are very common bitrates. 3500 is a very common bitrate to stream at. If you have a lot of upload speed that you can sacrifice for your stream, 1080p 60 frames per second on Twitch, that's really the sweet spot. That's really where you're going to want to go if you can manage it. And of course, you have to have the hardware to do it. And what you're seeing in front of you right now is 1080p 60 frames per second. I think I picked 6500 bitrate. So you can tell it looks clean and it looks good. If you can manage this upload, of course you're going to want to do it. But now the question is, do you even want to stream at 720p? If you don't have a very high upload, you could stream at some of these other ones that I have highlighted on here. You can pick different streaming resolutions. That way you can get the most out of your upload. Obviously, picking a higher resolution than 480p and picking a resolution between 480p and 720p, that's going to make your stream look better. So if you have like 3000 bitrate and you know you're not going to want to stream at 720p 60 FPS because you just don't like the way that it looks, you do some testing, it doesn't look that great, you can always pick something that's just a little bit below that, and I bet most people won't even notice. Small video break here for a piece of information that I forgot to touch on in the video, and I will do this as quickly as I can. If you are streaming to Twitch, Beam, Hitbox, YouTube, any of these streaming platforms, and you do not have transcoding options available to you, now this is common to new streamers or streamers who don't get a lot of viewers, you have to keep in mind that the viewer watching your video may not have very good internet. So what that means is if you have no transcoding options, they will only be viewing your source video. So if their internet cannot support the source video that you are putting out there, they will get choppy video or bad quality. What this means is, and what I recommend is for new streamers, if you are streaming a game like Overwatch, something that has a lot of fast-paced motion, pick 720p, 2500 bitrate, 30 frames per second. It's a good starting point. Back to the rest of the video. But at the end of the day, you, the content creator, has to make the decision on what you want to stream at in terms of bitrate and resolution, and the game dictates what bitrate and resolution that you can stream at that will make it look good. Sometimes it's just smarter to stick with a lower resolution, higher frame rate at specific bit rates, especially in these ballparks of 35 to 4500 bit rate. It may make sense to just stick with 720p 60 frames per second at 4000 bit rate on a game like Pub Battleground, CSGO, H1Z1, Overwatch, all those games that I listed. But if you're playing something like Civ, or you're playing an indie game, lower resolutions and lower bit rates, those are okay. And again, if you're a content creator and you're stressing out because you can't make your stream look 1080p 60 frames per second at 5K bitrate because your internet can't support it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. More content creators is great. And if you want to make content on Twitch or Beam or YouTube or Hitbox, Zubu, Steam, any of those, feel free to just do it. A lot of viewers will tune in even if your bit rate is low. Even if you have a 1500 bit rate and you stream at 480p, people may still tune in. Now, of course, that leads into a whole nother conversation about getting noticed on any of those platforms. But hopefully this helped you decide what bitrate and what resolution you want to stream at and what content you want to create for your viewers. I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, please like the video, leave a comment down below letting me know what you stream at, or let me know if you'd like me to do more of these videos, and definitely subscribe to me if you liked what you saw, and come back for more. I love you all. Until next time, Tonka out.